They'll be introduced by the moderator as we proceed further. We are also fortunate to have a number of UN professionals and practitioners participating today. I can see some of my friends from Turkey, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka also participating in today's event. A few words about both the institutes. United Service Institution of India is an autonomous body established in 1870 and the oldest think tank in India. USI has played a stellar role in furtherance of India's UN peacekeeping operations endeavor, and USI is founding member of Challenges Forum and collaborates with NUPI, EPON, CIPRI, and ICWA on various UN-related projects. Indian Council of World Affairs, that is ICWA, established in 1943, is the premium think tank of Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. A few words about today's theme of the webinar. In fact, armed conflict affects women, men, girls, and boys in a different ways. Women and girls face discrimination based on the gender, and displaced women and the refugees are especially vulnerable to conflict-related sexual violence. At the same time, women and girls play a key role in preserving their communities, and in turn, they take on the economic and the social responsibility, and which may increase during the time of conflict. Despite their ability to act as agent of peace, women are often excluded from the process of conflict resolution. Thus, recognizing this disproportionate impact that the conflict has on the woman and girl, the vital role they play in peace and security, and importance of incorporating gender perspective in all the alliances, United Nations Security Council unanimously passed Resolution 1325 on 31st October 2000. And today, it includes 9 additional resolutions. These resolutions seek to include women at all levels of decision making at different stages of the conflict. It also calls for incorporating the needs and the concern of the women in relief and recovery effort. However, this vulnerable community continues to suffer the most because of the absence of a comprehensive strategy to protect them. Women peacekeepers obviously serve as a powerful mentors and the role model for the women and girl in the post-conflict setting in the host community. The UN Security Council has set a target of doubling the number of women in the uniformed component of peace operation by 2028. Military observers and staff officers, they intend bringing up to 25%. In the military contingents, women participation up to 50%, 15%. Police officers up to 30%, and in the police units up to 20%. And in all other categories up to 30%. Even the remarkable progress has been achieved in the military observers, staff officers, or the police officers since the adoption of the Uniform Gender Parity Strategy. Efforts are still needed for the military contingent and the police units to reach this target by 28. It is not only reaching the target, but beyond that, to sustain them on a prolonged process. In continuation of the UN effort, on 1st February 22, UNFIL mission in Lebanon was released funds by the Canadian Illicity Initiative for Women in Peace Operations to support Women Peacekeeping Initiative. This is the statement of the head of the mission at Lebanon related to this fund allotment. India has a long tradition of sending women in the UN peacekeeping missions because India strongly believes that the more women in the peacekeeping means more effective peacekeeping. In fulfilling its commitments, India has a lot to its credit. In 1960, India deployed a team of women for Indian from Indian Armed Forces medical establishments in the UN peacekeeping mission in Congo to set up a 400-bedded hospital. And since then, the medical support has continued in all other missions. In 2007, India deployed the first ever all-female police unit in the Liberia, which served for a decade. Today, DIG Seema, who was the commandant of that unit in 2007, and Commandant Poona, who was the chief of staff of that unit, are among us. They will be sharing their views subsequently. India was the first country to contribute the Secretary General's Trust Fund for victims of the sexual exploitation and abuses, and also signed the Act on SEA in 2017. We have also pledged a woman-formed police unit under the Peacekeeping Readiness Capability System. India deployed the female engagement team at Congo recently in the rapidly deployable battalion in MONUSCO in 2020. India is fully committed to increase the number of women peacekeepers to the United Nations missions and meeting the target in this regard within a specified timeline. But Indian examples, unfortunately, remains a rarity. Indian efforts have been appreciated, recognized, and also rewarded. During de-induction of Indian formed police unit in February 2016 from Liberia, the president of the country, Ellen, I quote, she said, "We see you as a family. If I had my will, I would have recommended for another unit of the United Mission in Liberia to leave, so that the Indian formed police unit would continue to stay in the country for the time being," unquote. Indian Army Officer Major Suman Gawani of the Indian Army was awarded the UN Military Gender Advocate of the Year for 2019 for her role as a peacekeeper with the United Nations mission in South Sudan. Similarly, Ms. Sangya Mala from the Nepal Police Force, presently deployed in South Sudan, is recipient of the UN Women Police Officer of the Year Award for 2020. And we are fortunate that they will be sharing their experience with us today. Before I invite Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh, Director General ICWA, for opening remarks, a short introduction. Ambassador has been a career diplomat and had multiple experience during her service with the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. She was High Commissioner of India to Singapore and Ireland. She was also consular in the permanent mission of India to the United Nations in New York. She retired in September 2020 as Secretary East, Ministry of External Affairs. Now I'll request Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh for the opening remark. Over to you, Ambassador, please.
Thank you. A very good afternoon and good morning to those who are in other continents. It's a pleasure to see all of you, even though we are virtual. May I begin by thanking Major General B.K. Sharma, Director, USI, and Major General Pradeep Goswami, Deputy Director of USI, for putting together an absolutely wonderful panel. And it is a privilege for me to speak in the presence of such a distinguished panel of speakers, all of whom are women achievers in their respective fields, scholars, and officers of the army, paramilitary, and the police. With their rich experience, I'm confident that they will bring valuable insights to the topic of today's webinar, UN Peace Operations, Women, Peace, and Security. We are meeting in the backdrop of the appointment of Ambassador Rabab Fatima of Bangladesh. I'm glad there's a Bangladesh representation in our webinar today. Ambassador Rabab Fatima, she has taken over as the chair of the UN Peace Building Commission, the first woman to be elected to this position. And as an intergovernmental body, this commission supports peace efforts in conflict-affected countries and contributes to the capacity of the international community to further strengthen the peace agenda. In fact, the role of gender within the broader parameter of international relations and diplomacy needs serious consideration. We in ICWA held a conference last year on the topic, Women and Power, Gender within International Relations and Diplomacy, and in a subsequent conference focused on Why gender-sensitive Indian foreign policy? How and why? In these discussions, the need for applying a gender lens to foreign policy issues ranging from peace and security, including peacekeeping, to development partnership and humanitarian assistance was emphasized. It is well known that violent conflicts disproportionately affect women and girls and intensify gender inequalities and discrimination. Their role in conflict situations as key players and agents of peace is equally important, a fact that must be recognized as well as given prominence. At the international level, as was mentioned by General Goswami, the UN Security Council has adopted 10 resolutions on women, peace and security, with the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 at the center of this agenda. This resolution highlights the need to engage more women in peacekeeping operations around the world and also affirms the role of women in prevention management and resolution of conflicts, peace building, humanitarian responses, and post-conflict reconstruction. In other words, their role in the entire spectrum of peace efforts. Women's role in UN peacekeeping operations spans across police, military, and civilian levels. Today, women are playing a greater role in UN peacekeeping operations than in the past and have made a positive impact on peacekeeping environments. In 1993, only 1% of all deployed uniformed personnel in UN peacekeeping were women. In 2020, out of approximately 95,000 peacekeepers, women constituted 4.8% of military contingents and 10.9% of formed police units. A watershed moment occurred in 2014 when Major General Kristin Lund of Norway was appointed the first female to serve as force commander in a UN peacekeeping operation. It was in the UN peacekeeping force in Cyprus. The UN Uniformed Agenda Parity Strategy, which was rolled out in 2018, aims to increase women's representation to 35% by 2028. So the role of women peacekeepers is work in progress, and we all wish it well. And on India's part, we would be contributing to this effort. In all peacekeeping fields of peacekeeping, women peacekeepers have proven that they can perform the same role on same standards and under the same difficult conditions as their male counterparts. If at all, a larger number of women peacekeepers only adds to protection responses that are more credible and meet the needs of all members of local communities. Studies conducted by the UN in support of Resolution 1325 of experiences in the operations, whether in Cambodia, Kosovo, Timor-Leste, or in Afghanistan, Liberia, and DRC. All these have shown that female soldiers do not face the same cultural restrictions as their male counterparts and are able to gain information from women and children. Lieutenant Colonel Vanessa of the Canadian Army, who is participating in today's webinar, served in Afghanistan, and I am sure that she would have experienced this firsthand as I did as a diplomat in Kabul. The ability to gain the trust of local population should be considered a vital component of any peacekeeping operation. Further, troop contingents with a larger number of women are credited with lower sexual exploitation and abuse. We look forward to hearing the views of Major Suman Ganwani, who during a South Sudan mission has encouraged participation of joint military patrols to maintain gender balance. As one of the largest troop contributing countries to the UN peacekeeping mission, India has the distinction of providing the first ever female formed police unit for UN peacekeeping in Liberia. We are all very proud of this. I am sure that Commandant Poonam Gupta will share her experience as the Chief Operation Officer of this unit, as will DIG Seaman Dundia, who was also deployed with this mission. DIG Seaman Dundia even has to her credit the experience of raising the first all-women battalion in CRPF, India's paramilitary force. For its work in Liberia, India was hailed by the United Nations for its leadership, as this mission successfully demonstrated the participation of women in conflict management, the protection of women from conflict-related violence, and prevention of conflict. The then Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, only had praise for the work of the all-female FPU from India when it ended its mission in Liberia in 2016. More recently, India deployed a female engagement team in the UN Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo, MONUSCO, in 2019. Working during the COVID period was a very trying period for everyone globally. Superintendent of Police Sangya Mala of Nepal was deployed in this period in MONUSCO in Congo. In today's discussion, her views and experiences would add the dimension of women's role during health emergencies. In the current global peace and security context, and given the ongoing pandemic, the efforts to implement women's peace and security agenda is more critical than ever before. Women peacekeepers and the unique understanding, experiences, and capabilities they bring to bear on all aspects of UN peacekeeping operations is valuable for better peacekeeping. We look forward to the deliberations today and are interested in hearing the views of the speaker. Thank you so much. Over to you, General Goswami.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your opening remarks, and I'm sure speakers will be covering these issues which you have highlighted in some form or other during their talk. Now, let me introduce Dr. Yashi, our moderator for the day. Dr. Yashi. Dr. Yashi, you are on? Hello? Dr. Yashi, I can't see you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
can you hear me? I have some network problem.
Initially, you got disconnected. Okay. So let me introduce our moderator. She is Dr. Yashi Choidon. Is a professor of Center for International Politics, Organization and Disarmament in the School of International Studies, JNU, New Delhi. Her research interests include peace, security, democratization, and human rights. She is recipient of the UGC Career Award and Nehru Fulbright Senior Research Fellowship. She has authored 2 books, number of chapters in the edited volumes, and the number of research articles in the national and international journals. To set the ball rolling, now I'll request Dr. Yashi Choidon to start the proceeding. Over to you, Dr. Yashi.
Yeah, thank you very much, General Goswami. I have some network issue. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Yeah, so thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, General Goswami, for appointing me as a moderator and for this introduction. Now, today we are gathered here virtually to discuss how the UN peace operation have attempted to implement the UN's Women, Peace and Security Agenda. As you all are aware, the UN peacekeeping operation evolved as a most visible mechanism for maintenance of international peace and security due to the change in the nature of conflict from interstate to intrastate in the post-Cold War. One witnessed expansion of role and function of the UN peacekeeping operation. The interstate conflicts generated humanitarian crisis with a large-scale atrocity inflicted on the civilians. Although the UN peacekeeping operations mandate has been being given a multi-dimensional function since 1989, the UN Security Council did not give specific mandate for protection of civilians till late 1999. The moral and political pressure compelled the UN security to give specific mandate for protection of civilians in the case of UN mission in Sierra Leone in October 1999. Since then, the protection of civilians became one of the core tasks of the UN peace operation. Similarly, the plight of women and girls had been neglected, although they were impacted differently by the interstate conflict. Their peculiar vulnerability gave rise to demand for upgrading the women and girls issue from developmental agenda to peace and security agenda. Only in October 2000, the UN Security Council felt the need to take into account the gender issue in the conflict by passing Resolution 1329. Now the United Nations UN Peace, Security and Security Agenda consists of Security Council Resolution 1325 and 9 follow-up resolutions. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
We can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, so the resolution 1325 is a very comprehensive resolution, and the provision of this resolution can be categorized into three main themes. First major theme is a women's representation and participation. This resolution called all member countries to increase the representation and active participation of women in all decision-making levels relating to conflict prevention, conflict management, conflict resolution, and peace building. So in that sense, it is a calling for gender empowerment. Second major theme that this resolution highlighted is need to take into account the gender perspective. This resolution states that gender perspective should be adopted in the planning and implementation of the peace operation and peace negotiation. Third major theme, this resolution emphasizes on protection of women and respect for women's rights, especially the protection against sexual-based violence. So there were three major themes being discussed in this resolution. And this resolution also specifically called upon to increase the participation of women in peace, not just to address the issue of gender violence and exploitation of women, or just the protection of women, but it also asked for promotion of gender equality and ensure gender perspective and gender interests are not overlooked. It also called for a general effort to incorporate gender consideration during the planning and implementation of the UN peace operations. But in practice, there are several issues in implementation of women and peace security agenda of the United Nations in peace operations, UN peace operations. First major issue that I would like to highlight is excessive focus on protection aspect, neglecting the other two components of the resolution 1325. The attempt to increase the participation of women peacekeepers are justified on the ground that they could carry out protection of women more effectively, and the local women and girls are more comfortable to talking to the women peacekeepers. Further, the women peacekeepers are regarded as good at community engagement and outreach programs. This justification indicates the instrumentalist rationale of participation of women peacekeepers, reinforcing the gender stereotype notion of women having caring and peaceful nature. There is also a general view that peace operations are heavily focused on addressing sexual violence and exploitation. Highlighting sexual violence in conflict produces a focus on protection of the woman at the expense of women's participation and empowerment. It risks in reinforcing the traditional gender stereotype of women as a victim requiring protection. So the second major issue is the gender mainstreaming in the whole of UN peace mission is not being practiced. There's a heavy reliance on UN peacekeepers, gender units, gender focal points of the UN peace operation to implement this agenda. So the male peacekeepers' participation in implementation of this agenda is lacking. Third major issue is a preference for mixed unit rather than a separate women's unit like a female formed police unit deployed for the first time by India in Liberia in 2007. India's innovative approach of deploying women's peacekeeping units has been inspired by its own domestic practices of having separate police units and police stations in India. This practice being suitable for social cultural context of developing countries, including conflict-affected countries where women are still accepted as still a marginalized section of the community. The practice of separate women's unit could have been accepted as an alternative, worthwhile, temporary special measure to address the women's issue in the conflict and promotion of gender equity. Instead, it has been criticized as a gender segregated deployment. The fourth major issue is challenging the UN women peacekeepers confronted in the area of development about gender discrimination, lack of suitable facilities, additional burden of second shift, expectation of policing and disciplining the male peacekeepers, and expectation of having civilizational effect of their presence in area of development. I hope the subsequent speaker will throw light on some of these issues and enrich us by the vast academic and field experiences. Now I'll request the first speaker, Professor Tasmin Meena, to give her presentation. Before that, I would like to briefly introduce her. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, because I can't see anything. So Professor Tasmin Meena is a professor and former director of Nelson Mandela Center for Peace and Conflict Resolution in Jamia Millia, New Delhi. Her area of research interest includes a study of different dimensions of armed conflict, and conflict resolution, UN peacekeeping, peacemaking, peace building. And now I'll call upon Professor Tasmin Meena to give her presentation. I request the first three speakers to devote 15 to 18 minutes each for the presentation so that we'll have sufficient time for question answer session. Secondly, I'll request all the audience to write your questions to the speakers in the chat box in order to save time. So please write your questions in the chat box. Now over to you, Professor Tasmin Meena.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Major General B.K. Sharma, the Director of USI, and Ambassador Vijay Thakur Singh, the DG of ICWA, for inviting me to this webinar and giving me the opportunity to present the academician's perspective on women's peace and security and its challenges. I would like to upload a PowerPoint if I may be given a minute for that, please. Could I ask for help from the USI? I'm unable to upload the PowerPoint.
No.
Ma'am, do you want me to share the presentation, ma'am?
Sorry?
Do you want me to share the presentation? The presentation you have
Yes,
shared?
yes, I'm unable to.
Sure.
Okay, Gaurav, upload it, but Dr. Minai, you can keep telling him whenever you want to shift the slide.
All right.
Gaurav, go to next.
Please, Gaurav, you can, please stop at that. I wish to begin speaking from here.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. I have been asked to present my views on the challenges to the WPS agenda, and I shall be giving an overview. My presentation is divided into 4 parts. I shall be bringing out the institutional framework for peace, women, peace, and security at the UN. Then I'd be looking at the existing practice to promote WPS in UN peace operations. The focus will be on conflict-related sexual violence and challenges to the WPS agenda. And lastly, I would also look at some recommendations to improve the efforts for protection of women from sexual exploitation and abuse in UN peace operations. Please, the next slide, please. Yes, I begin by quoting from the UN Peacekeeping website in the context of WPS, and I quote, "Peace and security can only be achieved and sustained if all members of society are equal in terms of opportunities, protection, access to resources and services, and participation in decision-making," unquote. This quotation is meant to reflect the liberal, humanitarian, developmental, and democratic conception of peace, which forms the basis on which UN peace operations have been undertaken. Consequently, the WPS agenda also finds its expression in these. Please don't change the slide just now. The WPS agenda finds expression in these from these perspectives. For instance, if we look at the liberal perspective, it is meant to promote women equality. The humanitarian perspective is meant to provide protection of women from all kinds of violence. The developmental perspective is meant to enable the participation of women in development, as well as benefits that would accrue to women based on women empowerment and equity. And the democratic perspective is meant to provide opportunities to women in broad basing the process for democratic participation so that there is no discrimination on the basis of gender. Next slide, please. However, we find that women have been invisible in conflict analysis as victims, survivors, peace builders, and as perpetrators of violence. The gender perspective in international relations and peace and conflict studies has brought the focus on and recognition of women's agency and the immense potential they have in contributing towards peace. The WPS agenda is a significant international normative and policy framework addressing the gender-specific impacts of conflict on women and girls, more specifically in terms of conflict-related sexual violence that women and girls suffer. The post-Cold War period has witnessed an increasing number of interstate conflicts characterized by high levels of violence targeting civilians and greatly undermining the human rights of vulnerable populations, especially women and children. Women face particular difficulties during armed conflict and even in the aftermath of violent conflict. Next slide, please. The deliberate victimization of women through rape, mutilation, and forced pregnancies has increased international awareness of the differential impact of war on men and women. In most societies, in post-conflict situations, on account of patriarchal structures, women often face strong continuities with what happened during wars and with the nature of gender relations in society prior to armed conflict. The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda are commonly regarded as the events that put sexual violence in conflict on the international agenda. The 1998 ICTR John Paul Adekesiu case, in particular, has often been regarded as a historical achievement as it successfully prosecuted rape as genocide, despite the initial lack of readiness to do so. This and other landmark cases helped transform sexual violence in conflict from an unfortunate but inevitable byproduct of war to a grave human rights violation and a part of war crimes and crimes against humanity, torture, and genocide to achieve a weaponized status. The application and adherence to international humanitarian law, international human rights law, refugee law, and international criminal law to protect civilians was therefore mandated by the UN Security Council resolutions in various UN peace operations. Next slide, please. We now look at the institutional framework for women, peace, and security. UN Security Council Resolution 1325 for the first time dealt specifically with gender issues and women's experiences in conflict and post-conflict situations. The resolution recognizes women's contribution to peace building and conflict resolution and calls for their increased participation at all decision-making levels in national, regional, international, and conflict resolution initiatives. Next slide, please. This resolution highlights gender aspects of war and armed conflict, demanding the protection of women's rights, including shielding women and girls from gender-based violence and other violations of international law. The resolution calls upon local actors, member states, and the UN system itself to adopt a gender perspective in peace operations, negotiations, and agreements. Next slide, please. This has been pointed out by the previous speakers. We have had 9 more UN Security Council resolutions, which strengthen the WPS agenda and its implementation. Next slide, please. Within this normative framework of those 10 resolutions that we speak about, I'll now focus on the existing practice to promote WPS in UN peace operations. UN peace operations have made some progress in advancing the agenda on WPS. We see that there has been increased involvement of women in prevention and mediation efforts led by UN special envoys and the integration of gender dimensions into policies and strategies for electoral assistance and protection of civilians. There has been a consistent effort at training and capacity building on gender equality and WPS for peacekeeping personnel, engaging with civil society more comprehensively and enabling an improved understanding of gender dynamics of conflict. But we also see in the next slide that there has been a global study. Please, can I have the next slide? The global study done in 2015 to assess the implementation of 1325 says that there remains a poor understanding of the potential of both integrating a gendered perspective and increasing the participation of women at all levels of political and civil life, most especially at the leadership level. And from 2015, we come 3 years later, a special initiative undertaken by the UN Secretary General called the Action for Peacekeeping Initiative, launched in March 2018, which reaffirmed that women's full, equal, and meaningful participation in peace processes and political solutions is essential for effective peacekeeping. Next slide, please. In the context in which we see some of the aspects of implementation of 1325, we find that there are situations that are still of concern. Women continue to bear the burden of conflict and continue to be excluded from peace building and peacemaking efforts. Therefore, amongst the challenges confronted in implementing WPS, we find that in post-conflict, challenges are a continuation of sexual exploitation and abuse which women have faced during the armed conflict. Further, the UN has also received significant criticism for failing to stop cases of sexual exploitation and abuse perpetrated by UN peacekeepers and the culture of impunity for these crimes. Next slide, please. Therefore, much of the growth of the normative framework for WPS has focused on obligations to protect women in conflict settings, including from sexual violence. Though conflict-related sexual violence is not solely a women's issue, the UN Security Council mandated the prevention and response to CRSV as part of its WPS agenda, recognizing that women and girls face pre-existing patterns of gender inequality and discrimination and are the most frequent targets of sexual violence during armed conflict and political strife. Next slide, please. To remedy those challenges just enunciated, arising out of CRSV and SEA, that is, conflict-related sexual violence and sexual exploitation and abuse, it has been recommended that women's presence may be increased in UN peace operations. This has been based on normative and functionalist arguments. The normative argument is that UN must promote gender equality through its actions by improving the representativeness and diversity of its personnel in peace operations. The functionalist argument professes that an increased presence of women in UN peace operations improves operational effectiveness. So both the normative and the functionalist arguments in terms of increased participation of women in peace operations would also improve the operational effectiveness. Next slide, please. It is also contended that peacekeeping contingents with women are more trusted by local communities. They are able to make contact with vulnerable groups in conflict zones. They are better equipped to do tasks that require women, such as female body searches. They help to decrease the occurrence of sexual exploitation and abuse by other peacekeepers in their contingent and are less likely to perpetrate SEA themselves. Next slide. For the past 2 decades, when the UN began systematically addressing the issue of sexual exploitation and abuse in peacekeeping operations, serious deficiencies still persist. This is on account of the impunity of UN peacekeepers for violations of women's rights in armed conflict, including for perpetrating sexual exploitation and abuse. Also, key international institutions like the International Committee of the Red Cross, other human rights bodies, the International Criminal Court, and the UN Security Council are not implementing their own commitments and obligations with respect to women's rights in armed conflict. Next slide, please. It is therefore evident that UN Security Council activity on scrutinizing violations of the rights of women and girls in conflict under the WPS agenda is an ongoing process. Yet there is a patchy and inconsistent relationship between these thematic activities under WPS. For example, the UN Security Council continued to provide military support to the DRC National Army despite the Army's repeated inclusion in the UNSC's own listing processes of perpetrators of sexual violence in conflict and of grave violations of children's rights in conflict. Next slide, please. By way of recommendations, we can highlight the specific role of gender officials in UN peace operations. I am just enumerating some of them here because I know that the next speakers are going to speak a lot from their field experience on these issues. The inclusion of women, both those receiving assistance and those responsible for providing it, in the assessment, implementation, and monitoring of programs is a tool to more appropriately define women's needs and ensure their effective involvement. This in turn ensures more effective and sustainable programming and minimizes the potential for exploitation and abuse. As per the high-level panel report of 2015, women protection advisors ensure better monitoring, analysis, and reporting on conflict-related sexual violence. Next slide, please. Improved fact-finding and reporting techniques can strengthen the capacity of an organization to monitor violations against women. These should include, where possible, the use of female protection personnel, medical staff, and interpreters during interviews and their follow-up. Staff members should be trained in culturally appropriate listening skills and interview techniques, and, where appropriate, culturally sensitive counseling for trauma. Next slide, please. And these are some of the work that we find that senior women protection officers and women protection officers fulfill. They fulfill a crucial role in implementing the conflict-related sexual violence protection mandate of UN missions. They form part of the UN architecture of sexual violence in conflict and are deployed at the request of UN Security Council to missions settings in order to support the implementation of the specific UNSC mandate. Gender units are a critical partner to senior women protection advisors and women protection advisors due to their complementary mandates under the WPS agenda. Gender units should provide support to SWPAs in strengthening women's participation, representation, and empowerment as an enabler of CRSV prevention and response, and in delivering of mission mandates. Next slide, please. By way of a conclusion, I would like to focus on the role of the UN Security Council in strengthening UN peacekeeping operations and the WPS agenda. The UN Security Council should work urgently to improve alignment between its WPS agenda and its country-specific activities. It should institutionalize the WPS agenda through establishing a working group on WPS. More effective mechanisms are needed for ensuring the listing of perpetrators by the UNSC. The UNSC should consider a mechanism for imposing sanctions on listed perpetrators of children and women's rights. And last of all, the UN should institutionalize mechanisms for excluding women's rights violators from UN peacekeeping forces. So this forms, in a nutshell, this forms the overview of how the WPS agenda evolved and how limited the implementation has been so far. I would like to thank you for your attention, and this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and Professor Dasmi Meena, for timely conclusion of your presentation. You took 17 minutes, 55 seconds. The next speaker I would call upon Lieutenant Colonel Hans Ra Han. And she is a military police officer of Canadian Forces, and she has a rich field experience in terms of, she was a officer commander of the Canadian police team in Afghanistan, training the Afghan police forces. And she was also a special advisor to the Canadian forces deployed in the UN mission in South Sudan. I'll request Colonel Han Rana to give her presentation.
Good day, everyone. Just to confirm that you can hear me without any issues.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. First, I'll apologize. It's a little early in the morning here in Canada, but thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm actually very humbled to be included in an audience of very accomplished women and men. For me, the subject of women, peace, and security is one which is very important. As a serving female member in the Canadian Armed Forces, it is very near and dear to my heart. I'm very proud that I can say Canada created the ELSI initiative in 2017, which works along several lines of effort to improve the meaningful contribution of women in peace operations. I know that many other countries have implemented similar strategies, and for me, this is a very encouraging movement around the world to ensure we have better representation of females within peace and security operations. Today, I've been asked to speak to you to address several specific points regarding the protection of women in conflict zones and the role of peacekeepers, I won't say female, but the role of peacekeepers in general in achieving this task. I would like to start off by saying that it has been my experience that the UN and all contributing nations supporting UN missions have definitely improved in addressing the role of women in peace and security. From the perspective of both the integration of female peacekeepers and that of addressing the protection of civilians, specifically vulnerable populations, which include women. But I also would like to say there is most certainly more work to be done in this area. The first aspect that I would like to address today is what can UN peacekeepers, both male and female, do to improve the protection of women in conflict zones? Based on my experiences, both during UN missions as well as NATO operations, one of the very first things we can do as peacekeepers is to enhance the role of the local or host nation women at the tactical level. That is to say, we need to ensure that the integration of women is better carried out during peacekeeper engagement within the local communities and villages. On most deployments that I've been involved, all missions include what we call key leader engagements. And these take place with the senior representatives of a village or community. But what I've noted is that female members of this community are not often in attendance. And if they are, it is at the permission of the elders. The females, the local population, does not actually engage in the discussion, nor do we as peacekeepers attempt to engage them in the discussions surrounding the area of peace and security. For example, during my time with UNMISS in the South Sudan, the integration of the engagement team concept did indeed improve the female interactions. However, it was normally carried out independent from KLEs or other meetings within the community. What I believe to be a more effective process is to see more of an integrative approach, whereby both female and male members of the community come together to discuss the UN priorities for the community and the security concerns within the community. Integration is key. Though it is very effective to address male and female independently, in order to achieve what I think it is the UN is set out to achieve, which is meaningful participation of women in the peace and security process, we must understand the importance for women and men to work together. And I think that just echoes some of the comments that I've heard already here this morning, or this afternoon for most of you. Second, I would like to say that we need to improve peacekeeper awareness. For me, that means we all have biases, both conscious and unconscious, and we must be aware of these biases in order to diminish their effects on how we function during peacekeeping operations. This point speaks directly to my previous comment about a community engagement. We as peacekeepers may deploy on a mission with our own ideas regarding the role of women. Some may be in line with that of the UN and some may not. We must be aware of this and work to ensure we are adapting the perspectives of the UN and encouraging all women to be more empowered within the domain of peace and security. I would argue that this must be applied both within the UN system as well as our engagement with the local population. For me, we must ensure that female peacekeepers are permitted and seen to carry out not what most consider non-traditional roles. For me, for example, when I joined the military police, it was considered a non-traditional role for females. I do believe that has changed some over time, but I believe that was a bias that exists and continues to exist that we must fight against, because there is no tradition and non-traditional role. For me, a woman or a man are equal and they may carry out anything within a community or an institution such as a force. Further, it is my recommendation that the UN look to place more UN female peacekeepers in senior or what I would call strategic positions. For me, it's the lead by example approach approach that is always most effective. In my opinion, seeing female peacekeepers leading a key leader engagement, leading a UN peacekeeper team in a village, or placed in command or key staff positions must happen. Being the face of the UN to the local population reinforces that females are not only capable, but must be part of the conversation when addressing peace and security. They should be seen as having an equal voice. Encouraging the local community to take an integrative approach is the next step in addressing the need for the local population to recognize the importance of women, the important role they play in the stability of their village, their region, their country. In doing this, I expect that over time, we will contribute not only to the reduction of violence against women, but women will be seen as a powerful image within their community. To apply this to a real life, I will highlight that as a force provost marshal in UNMISS for 1 year, 2019 to 2029, the end of 2019 to the end of 2020, I was the only female within the mission of approximately 15,000 military members at the rank of colonel or above. That's not to toot my horn and say that I'm something special. That's not my point. For me, it's encouraging yet discouraging to see this. I believe there are many capable, competent, professional females who should be integrated within the UN process and hold command positions, senior staff positions, such as the Force Provost Marshal, as well as tactical level key positions. It is not only for me about an increase in the total number of females within peacekeeping operations, but it is about the meaningful participation of females within peacekeeping or peace operations. This must include the presence of females within these leadership positions where females can affect change and influence operations at both the tactical, operational, and strategic levels. We must ensure there is not systematic processes or internal biases even within our own militaries that impede the ability of females to have equal opportunity within a UN structure or our own military or civilian police structures. Now, if I may, let's move on to the question regarding the role of female military and police members in protecting women. For me, I kind of bridge the gap between two. I'm a military police officer, so I very much understand the role of females within a military institution and the role of females within a policing institution. First, a female presence in the UN demonstrates the capabilities of females. The integration of females within the UN is an example to be emulated. Though there is need for improvement, we have to emulate what we have done. Again, it is the concept of lead by example. Female police and military members act as a means of inspiring local females to speak up, to become involved. It gives them confidence that they are important and they can contribute to the peace and security of their country. Empowering women is an effective and efficient means of improving their willingness to face the dangers and improve their quality of life and that of their daughters. On every mission that I have participated in, I have had the occasion to speak with local women and have been humbled by their comments about how seeing a woman in uniform interacting and integrated with their male counterparts inspires them to change the situation for themselves and the future of females within their own country. In Afghanistan, for example, I was told that seeing women in uniform inspired Afghan females to join the Afghan police. I actually had the experience of issuing certificates to the first 2 male senior police sergeants to be integrated within the Afghan police in the province of Kandahar. For me, it was absolutely inspiring to see the challenges that they overcome to be able to be members of their police institution, and to ensure that women were being represented and the issues surrounding women were being represented within their own force. Further, some of my Afghan male counterparts talked to me about the customs and traditions that have invoked violence in women and how they now realize the unfairness of these practices and how they hope to improve the living conditions for their daughters. absolutely the right answer. We see change happening simply because we see faces of women integrated within a NATO mission or a UN mission or our own institutions at home. The second point, female and military police members, military member presence provides a platform for some females to come forward and talk about violence that they are experiencing. It has been proven that many females are more comfortable speaking with other females when discussing sensitive matters, specifically violence that they face every day. But as that is not the only case, some women are equally comfortable speaking to men. That is why I believe we must have an integrated approach. But again, the use of female engagement teams in UNMISS is an excellent example of how the presence of females have improved the interactions between the local female population and the UN. One of the best results from this is this has allowed the UN to know better the situation and react to the violence that exists within communities. To me, knowledge is power. Knowing that the violence is taking place ensures that we can find a means to address the problem. Without female military and police persons, I personally believe we would not have been privy to the same level of information, meaning that we would have been less effective at curbing the existence of violence within any one community. With a better understanding of the intelligence picture, the UN can better develop plans that actually address not only the violence of women, but the role of women in peace and security. It is essential to finding a way to eliminate or at least diminish the violence that is taking place. Next, from my point of view, at the operational and strategic level, diversity is a strength. That is to say that female military and police persons provide varying perspectives in the planning process of UN missions at all levels, whether it be tactical, operational, or strategical. When developing a mission operational plan, females in the room ensure there is a more holistic approach to the reduction of violence against women, but I would believe to a holistic approach to how we conduct operations in general. Who better than a female to assist in determining the manner in which we should face problems affecting women, men, and children? When deployed again with UNMISS, I was the task force program marshal. I was employed at the FHQ, and daily I was employed. I took part in the planning of operations. Again, in Afghanistan, I was the commander for a police training team. Both times, I saw the value in having the perspectives of females, diversity, during the planning process. As a result of this diversity, the initial plans created were better developed to face all potential situations. If we put in more effort at the beginning, it gives us more operational effectiveness on the ground. Switching focus a little, may I take a moment to speak to you about the importance of the other pillars within the UN. Entities such as the Protection of Civilian Advisor, the Gender Advisory Group, are all essential to UN missions and contribute to the protection of women. In my experience, these pillars address the protection and integration of women both externally and internally. For the force, for most forces, this is normally accomplished through the Force Gender Advisor, which is a critical role in the planning process within the force headquarters. I think that to achieve the UN protection of civilian mandate, we must have a holistic approach integrating all available resources, civilian, military, and policing. Persons within the civilian components have ample experience in education and peace and security, therefore are a viable source of information for peace operations. Not just civilian peace operations. For me, operations within the UN must incorporate peace, civilian, police, and military. According to me, and based on my experiences over my career, this is one area of the UN which has some room for improvement, though. That is to say that currently there is much focus from some of these entities to address internal gender integration and security, mainly women within the UN system. They are using in their efforts to improve gender integration within the military and police components of the UN. This is most certainly an important aspect and one which must be addressed. But for me, there can be more of a balance between the internal audience and the external audience. That said, I think their approach is appropriate. We cannot address the protection of civilians women violence if we do not have a safe, secure environment within the mission for our own female members. It's about lead by example, but we must ensure we not only address internal, but we look forward and outward to address what exists in the local population for which the UN mission exists to support. The last point that I would like to speak to today is the revision of the DPO policy on protection of civilians. With all policy, the challenge remains the balance between a policy that is flexible and agile, while at the same time defined enough to provide clear direction and guidance at the operational level. A policy that cannot be implemented on the ground is of no use. For me, a policy needs to be clear and concise, with achievable and defined outcomes. I would encourage the UN to ensure that the protection of civilian policy is holistic and integrative. It should incorporate all pillars of the UN system and enforce the necessity for all to work together to address the situation. Diversity is key. I cannot say it enough. There is no one solution to address protection of civilian. Therefore, bringing the experiences that exist from the civilian, police, and military components, both male and female, of the UN will greatly enhance the potential for future success. On that note, I would just like to reiterate that I believe female military and police members of the UN have achieved much greatness, and the level of integration within the UN has improved over the last decade. I know that there's still work to be done, but that starts here, at home. With a better integration of women within all military and police forces around the world, contributing nations of the UN will be better poised to support UN missions across the globe. It is our efforts here that will greatly affect our efforts abroad. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you today and share some of my points of view. I am very humbled, and I know that already today I've learned much from the presenters who have come before me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Colonel Hanrahan. You have really completed within the time limits, 17 minutes, 46 seconds. Thank you very much. Now, next, I would call upon Commandant Poonam Gupta. Before that, I would like to introduce her as she's from the Central Reserve Police Force of India. And she has a lot of field experience. She was the chief operational officer of the first batch of the all female Indian formal police unit for Liberian in 2007, and subsequently she was a contingent commander of the same unit in 2011. So I request Commandant Poonam Gupta to give her presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah. I'm just giving my presentation to. First of all, I must express my heartfelt thanks to Major General PK for this opportunity to be part of this webinar, and I was given the topic, and before going into this topic, I must mention that Srimati Seema India is also available on the panel. She will be speaking after me, and she was my contingent commander in 2007 when we landed for the first time with the all female contingent to Liberia from India.
Can your screen is not visible? Are you doing the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, I am.
It's not visible.
You can't see me?
The
screen isn't visible?
Yeah, the screen is not. Yeah, now we can see. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Before I speak on this topic, I must tell you that my experience with UN dates back, as has been told, that it was in 2007 and subsequently in 2011. And since then, there was a break of more than 10 years. So I'm not very much in touch with this topic, but I'd like to speak from my experience that I was there in Liberia. And second, it was in the post-conflict scenario that we were deployed. Can you hear me, please? Hello. Hello.
Hello? Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Before proceeding about the situation, the topic that has been given, I would want to introduce Liberia to the panel. It's one of the oldest republics of Africa, never been under any colonization rule. It has an area of approximately 111,369 kilometers square. So many ethnicities, 16 major ethnicities, 15 counties, and over the country there's a spread of different ethnicities. And country gained its independence in 1847, the Declaration of Independence, and the first president of Liberia was elected in 1848. Mr. Joseph Jenkins Roberts, he was the first president of Liberia, and he came from Americo-Liberian ancestry, and subsequently, till about Mr. William Richard Tolbert, all the presidents were Americo-Liberian. So the other tribes of Liberia did not have any representation as far as the presidency was concerned. There was a hard one about this, and in 1980, Samuel Doe assassinated the then president and acquired the position of chairman of People's Redemption Council. He was from Kran tribe. So this is the first time a tribal leader occupied the place as the chairman, and thereafter he declared himself elected as the president of Liberia. And subsequently, the first civil war started in Liberia. The National Patriotic Front of Liberia returned with mostly people from the tribal. Here, I just want how has this conflict has started between the tribes and then has engulfed the whole country. The National Patriotic Front of Liberia, most it consisted of the Geo and Mano tribes. They clashed with the government forces and an ethnic militia supporting Samuel Doe. So NPFL was the first group to have used child soldiers in Liberia. The first civil war started from 1989, and in 1995, the Abuja Accord was signed when the ECOWAS troops forced the two sides to come for an agreement. In between, in 1990, Samuel Doe was killed. So from the tribal leader, Charles Taylor was again an Americo-Liberian. He remained president since August 297 to 11th August 2003. And then the war started in 1999 and continued till 2003, when Charles Taylor resigned and left the country for Nigeria. So see, this is what all happened in Liberia from 1980 to 2003, where peacekeeping efforts were tried by ECOWAS, but a lot of destruction, many killings, maimings, etc. happened. So there were noteworthy peacekeeping efforts in ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, from 1990 to 2003, majorly the military of Nigeria and Ghana they were participating along with the military contingents of the other West African countries. And because of their intervention, the Abuja Accord was signed. And thereafter, in 2003 again, after the second civil war happened in Liberia, this peace accord happened in 2003, where it took place in Accra, Ghana. UN came into picture in 2003. After September 19, 2003, the UN resolution approved a resolution, UNSC approved a resolution 1509 for deploying UN peacekeeping missions in Liberia to monitor ceasefire. This mission continued till 2018, 30th March. Major accomplishments of the UNMIL remained like disarmament of 100,000 combatants, securing 21,000 weapons, and enabling 1 million refugees to come home, and assisting in holding peaceful presidential and legislative elections. There has been wars, a long war, except for the 2 years period between 1997 to 1999. There has been huge consequences for the country as far as war, civil war that took place twice in that country. 150,000 people died. That would be around 8% of the population of the country. This was the number of people who were killed. Displacement of over 1 million of people to neighboring countries. That was more than 1/3 of the population, existing population of the country at that point in time. 21,000 child soldiers who were taken away from their families, were habitual users of hard drugs, alcohol. They were made to kill their own families. So they were cut off from their families, and now in 2003, when the UN came in, they were awaiting reintegration to the society. The torture, rape, abduction of women, for sexual servitude, and to serve at the front lines were it was common at that point in time. The unemployment rate was very high because the jobs had collapsed, the industries had stopped, people had left the country. So the unemployment was very high. The literacy rate in the 14 years of the war, because the schools weren't functioning, the infrastructure had been destroyed. The children stopped going to the school in the fear of the forced recruitment of child soldiers. Fear of life and limb forced people to stay away from education, created learning gaps, and many people remain illiterate because of this long-drawn civil war. World's population, because of no employment, were reeling under poverty. People were earning less than $1 a day. And obviously, because of large mobilization of people with money had already left the country. So the doctors had left, a lot of people with means had left. Therefore, large percentage of infant and maternal mortality, this was both in the country and also in the places where the people fled to. And that had resulted because poverty and unemployment had led to high instances of severe stunting. Other costs of the civil wars the people had to face, where there were destruction of homes, buildings, roads, dams, services. Lots and lots. There was a big loss for the country as a whole because of the long-drawn civil war. There's a few pictures and how people were, and we arrived in 2007. There was much improvement, but the country had to face a lot of grief because of the long-drawn civil war, and women and girls, being an integral part of the society, definitely had to face the brunt of the long-drawn civil war. Resolution 1325, as many speakers have already spoken about it, this first historical document was the first of its kind to address specifically the impact of war on women and women's contribution to conflict prevention, management, and resolution. It also stressed on the importance of bringing gender perspective to the center of all UN efforts related to peace and security, and recognize that women are not only the victims of conflict, but also are key actors in maintenance of internal peace and security. Thereafter, India made a commitment to send peacekeepers to UN peacekeeping operations in 2006, and hence, first all-women formed police unit to Liberia was sent on 30th January 2007. It comprised of 103 women officers, were all operation officers, and the male officers were the logistic support staff. There were total 9 rotations in all, and for Indian FPU, the mission closed in 2016. The president of Liberia was, as my previous speakers spoke about, she was very, very appreciative of the efforts of the women of Indian FPU. Coming to the challenges to protecting women in conflict zone. I could tell you my experience in the post-conflict scenario only, because that is what I had seen. There was a large-scale gender-based violence. Somewhere I was studying that it was at some point in time, it has been mentioned that it was at least 80% women and girls had experienced some kind of exploitation, based physical exploitation or sexual exploitation, but the sexual violence remained comparatively invisible, statistically underestimated because of the cultural constraints and strong feeling of shame and fear engendered by the sexual violence. Most victims do not seek help. It adds to the devastating effects to them, their families, their communities, and then seeing the perpetrator in front of their eyes makes without any remedies, it hurts more. The victim's inability to get access to economic support, adequate legal remedies, because the ladies will be on the fringes of anything which comes out. Unless it is surplus, it doesn't go to women per se. Displacement has put the women in these conflict places in very, very vulnerable positions. Many of them in a position where they were facing certain kind of violence, particularly the sexual violence. Availability of weapons make them further vulnerable to sexual assaults. Destruction of civilian infrastructure, lights in the street, to houses, to hospitals, to dams, to roads. The women, a small thing as small as a light bulb on the street takes a woman from feeling secure to insecure. When destruction is such large extent, definitely the feeling of insecurity increases exponentially. Non-availability of reproductive health, not only in the country, but also in the places where they had fled to escape persecution or escape being killed, maimed. It has reduced the resources for women. During conflict, the priorities are resources that keep the war running. The resource allocation for the issues affecting women are of one of the first casualties. Illiteracy, as I've already said, that the infrastructure, the conflict had already affected the infrastructure, discouraged children from attending colleges and schools, leaving generations illiterate, thus restricting the income generation and hence leading to poverty and hence susceptible to violence and sexual abuse. Marginalization in policy making and administration, as conflicts always do, they force women out of administration to be put in fringes because the priority is to fight wars. And as soon as the wars are over, the national police, other law enforcement agencies are dismissed en masse. New national police and the law enforcement agencies are recruited, and obviously one cannot learn the things overnight. It takes time. So because of their limited availability of resources, insufficient training, unavailable infrastructure, is an impediment to effective availability of criminal justice system. Lastly, and there could be many more as well after this, limited reach of UN personnel and agencies. UN has limited number of blue helmets on the ground. That leaves many places vulnerable and unattended. Similarly, the UN agencies cannot reach all the people, which also leaves many persons without having the resources, having the facilities which are provided, so that the ladies can or the girls can take advantage of and come out of the issues at hand immediately. A few recommendations that I put out here. Support to gender violence victims, because one of the first thing when a woman sees a perpetrator who is not held accountable for their actions is first. So they need to have a secure environment so that they can come forward with their experience. They be provided treatment, counseling, legal support, so that the victims can hold their perpetrators accountable for their actions. Provide educational opportunities to those who have missed education due to violence in the form of bridge courses. This is what actually happened in Liberia. There were, because of long drawn civil wars, the minimum educational requirement were not met by many people who could become part of the government, and therefore in UNMIL, with the assistance of United Nations, the bridge courses were introduced so that the literacy gaps could be fulfilled. Encourage government and communities to increase the participation of women, but the intake of the women should also be in the policy making or higher decision making bodies will be crucial for greater inclusiveness and gender equality. Empower women to vote, to run for office, and to join police and other law enforcement institutions to provide support and succor to other institutions. Establishing training and mentoring of the law enforcement agencies would be very crucial. In all these, the UN has been supporting, and the support should be more and more so that to empower the local people to take over their own country with the standards of the international standards of human rights and policing and law enforcement. Do away with the gender bias, make people comfortable in asking police for help, and feel safe when they call police. Systematic community engagement, effective criminal justice system, as I've already said, post-war dispute resolution. In this, impartial and fair dispute resolution, including the land dispute arising out of the displacement of population, because when a person leaves and comes back after 14 years, the land is being tilled by some other person, and there are disputes because of the land arising out of the displacement of population. Reduce poverty, skill development, employment generation, increase access to social service, health, include. Last is, I would want to say that include police and military peacekeepers in community outreach, because as has been my experience, that there were a few activities which were undertaken by the Indian female FPU. It was more on our own accord rather than we were mandated by the mission to do it. The female FPU first was training of Liberian National Police. This was definitely was done by the UN mission headquarters in Liberia. The next few points: provided medical cover to nearby communities, imparted self-defense skills to women, conducted workshop on prevention of sexual violence, supported orphanages, schools in the community, in line with the community engagement of Indian FPU, supported, mentored Liberian women joining NP. Medical support, these were all done by the peacekeepers, the women peacekeepers on their own accord. So if that would get somehow that peacekeepers can do with this, with the mandated program, it would be fantastic, because when you get in touch with the women there, it is actually very, very motivating for them. And as has been reported many times, that there has been impact of female FPU in Liberia. The participation of women in the Liberian law enforcement agencies increased from 7% to 17% during the deployment of FPU, Indian FPU, and fourfold increase in the number of women applying to become police officers. These are two impacts which are quantifiable, verifiable, and the Indian contingents over a period of 9 years were can be summarized by the statement that Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the then Secretary General, he spoke in 2016 when the last rotation was returning to the country. He said, the unwavering performance, professionalism, and discipline, they managed criminality, deterred sexual and gender-based violence. So the president of Liberia, the mission head, and the local public at large were all appreciative of the work that we did. But it would be more if more and more women participate in the missions and are able to reach out to communities where they serve. I do not have time, otherwise I had a small video to show to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Commandant Poonam Gupta. Now I have three more speakers. I request these three speakers to restrict their presentation for 8 minutes so that we'll have sufficient time for question answer session. The first person that I would call is a Deputy Inspector General of General Seema Dunrai, as she is from the Central Reserve Police Force of India, and she has numerous firsts to her credit. Some of them are she joined Central Reserve Police Force in 1987 in the first batch of the lady officers, and she is the first contingent commander of the all-female formed police unit of India deployed in Liberia in 2007. So I request Deputy Inspector General Seema Dona for her presentation.
Thank you so much for inviting me to the seminar. Am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you, but video is off.
Okay, let me try, sir.
Yeah, now it's okay.
Is it okay now, sir?
Yes.
Yeah. I am privileged to be a part of today's webinar and hope that it turns out to be fruitful as designed and planned for. Whatever I wanted to say, most of the part has been covered by Poonam. She was there with me in 2007 in Liberia. She was my chief operation officer. And whatever we did as a team. But there are certain things which I would like to add. In Poonam's version, being a police officer, it is our moral obligation to perform in a manner which leaves an everlasting impression in the eyes of the public. Further, the sense of duty increases manifold when the deployment takes place in an unknown territory, a conflict-ridden zone, with lots and lots of women and young girls as victims. So it is very challenging for a police officer to perform under these scenarios. Yes, of course, the physical presence of peacekeepers does make a difference, but the most important thing is to have the communication established. What I feel that communication is the panacea for most of the problems. No amount of physical protection or protective environment can develop a sustainable peace if the channels of communications are not effectively regulated or established. A message has to go down the lines that peacekeepers have arrived and they are there to protect the victims and establish rule of law. Not only their actions, but their body language should also speak volumes. So for a peacekeeper, especially donning a blue helmet under UN banner, his body language is also being observed. So every peacekeeper has to be particular about his or her body language as well, besides other duties. As we did in Liberia, I speak from my own experience, we contacted the local women's group. They were the ones who were giving free legal aid and service to the victims. We tried our level best to disseminate the information about these groups to the victims. We started giving pep talks on radio channels, and the message was very loud and clear. So we were, trying our level best to establish a communication channel with the local communities, with the victims. The motive was to win over the trust and confidence of the victims. Our presence was at every nook and corner, 24/7, gave them courage and independence to move around without any fear. I am of the view that every single officer deployed under UN banner should be trained, sensitized, and should understand the finer nuances of the social fabric of that particular country where he or she is going to be deployed. Further, carefully drawn mandate is an essential requirement. As Poonam has very rightly pointed out, it should not have any ambiguity. The mandate should not have any ambiguity, and the roles for the peacekeepers should be precise and clear. I can say from my own experience, some of the activities that we did in Liberia were not the part of the laid down duties. We had to go overboard in order to attain the objective, that is of peace building. We adopted the communities, started giving training to the local girls, started inviting them to our camps in order to win their trust and confidence. Am I okay? Audible? Hello?
It is okay, it's okay. Poonam, you can switch off your mic.
And as the concept note of today's webinar emphasizes on establishment of a protective environment, I would again reiterate that three things are important. Number one, presence of well-trained, sensitized peacekeepers. Then establishment of effective communication channels. Having more female keepers is definitely an advantage as far as establishing communication channel is concerned. Then carefully drawn mandate taking into consideration the social fabric of the country where the peacekeepers are deployed. The role for peacekeepers should be crystal clear in the mandate itself. Further, taking the local women's grip in the confidence and start working in tandem. Not only the local women group, but also other UN agencies which are working there. They should also be taken into picture, and the police officers, the peacekeepers who are deployed there should work in tandem with those local agencies, UN agencies like UNICEF, UN World Food Programme, UNHCR. So all these agencies should work in tandem. And of course, last but not the least, increasing participation of women in decision making. So there should be more representation of women in decision making forums. So during the span of 1 year when we stayed in Liberia, the representation of local women in Liberian National Police increased manifold. We could instill a sense of confidence amongst the local women, the victims, and everybody was appreciative of our own efforts, of our efforts. So these are the things I would like to tell you, and I admit that most of the things I wanted to show have been covered by my previous speakers. Thank you, sir.
Yashi, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Deputy General, Deputy Inspector General Seema Dohan, for sharing your experience in Liberia operation. Now, next, I'll call upon Major Suman Gawani. She's from Indian Army, and she served as a UN peacekeepers in the UN mission in South Sudan in 2019. And she's awarded the prestigious UN Military Gender Advocate of the Year award, and she received the award on 26th of May 2021. I request Major Suman Kohani to give her presentation around 8 minutes. Hello. Hello.
Greetings of the day, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I am audible to everyone.
Yeah, you're audible. Yeah.
Thank you for confirming, Professor Yeshi. Thank you so much for for my introduction. At the outset, I would like to thank the USI and Major General P.K. Goswami for giving this opportunity to speak at this esteemed forum about my experiences in the South Sudan. The status of women, peace and security is not very encouraging in many parts of the world. The fact that all of us from different time zones are sitting here and trying to talk about it brings us down to the reality of gender equality and security issues that are arising from it. All these issues I experienced when I was deployed in South Sudan. This is a country which has experienced the freedom very recently. Most of the places here are conflict zones, and condition of people, especially women and children, is very moving. These people struggle for basics like food, water and shelter, and crimes against women and children have been used or adopted as the easier tactics of war by many. I think when from my experiences as a peacekeeper and from my experiences as a military observer in South Sudan, I think the importance of integrated teams, I think the importance of gender balanced teams in a mission area cannot be overlooked. I was the only female in a team of 10 military observers. During the patrols to different villages and interior areas of South Sudan, I could feel and I could sense that it was very easy for me as a uniformed personnel, as a person who's wearing a blue helmet, to interact with the community consisting of women and children. These people would build a rapport with us very easily and share their experiences with us very easily, because they had a lot of confidence when they see a woman in uniform. When it's a male-only team that goes to these places, and when they try to talk to these marginalized communities, the women, they are not very comfortable with talking to them, or I would say that the survivors most of the times are not comfortable in connecting with the male-only teams, because many times or most of the times they see an image of their perpetrators in them. Because these people are not generally able to differentiate between who their perpetrators were or who are the UN peacekeepers that have come to save or to interact with them. As Colonel Vanessa has already told, that we should, as a UN, we should lead by example. I think the integrated teams would serve an excellent example with the society, that even the most difficult tasks can be accomplished if men and women both come together and they perform a task jointly. So integrated teams serve this purpose very perfectly. During most of my patrols, when we saw this, and I got a chance to be deployed in the force headquarters, and I was a member of the observers team. We made sure that in every team site, we had 11 team sites in South Sudan. So one of our major aim, one of our major resolution was to send at least 2 female military observers to each team, so that more and more gender integrated teams could be sent to different areas in the mission. So I would say that is nearly achieved, and we were able to achieve this aim because when I had gone to mission, there were 21 observers, female military observers in the entire mission. And by the time I was about to leave the mission, the number of female military observers had rose to 42. So I think we were successful in at least having two military observers, female military observers in one team, so that more integrated teams could be sent. Actually, I was fortunate enough to be a part of the team which was a process. South Sudan was making the roadmap to prevent conflict-related sexual violence. So our team from Force Headquarters, which also I was one of the part of it, and the gender advisor of UNMISS was there. So we used to go to different places and educate the South Sudan or the South Sudan government officials, South Sudan armed forces, and South Sudan police about the women, peace, and security. We were educating them about it. We were telling them about the rights of the women. We were telling them about the crimes that are being done against women and children. So, conflict related sexual violence. So I think that was one of the major achievements, and that was a very, very good experience for me, because in this process we interacted with a lot of generals of South Sudanese armed forces. We interacted with a lot of women who were working in South Sudanese armed forces. We got the insight to how they work and how much do they know about these things. So I think as in the part of this process, we were able to ingrain the importance of women, peace, and security in amongst those people. One of the during patrols, I think these when I used to meet South Sudanese forces, soldiers, and all, I could see that these people were in disbelief that even a woman can wear uniform and a woman can do all these jobs which we are able to do. I think this sends a message to them that even in their society they need to bring about a change. So women peacekeepers, when they are integrated into a team of male, or there is an integrated team, I think that sends a strong message to the community that they need to work towards the rights and towards the safety of their own women and children, of course. I think with all my experience, I've seen that the people are tired of war, and women are at the receiving end of all that crimes that are happening, and they are the ones who have the children to look after. But a point here I want to make is that it will not suffice. It will not suffice if we only keep educating women about it, or if it will not suffice if we keep on adding only women to it. I think integration is the key. I think both men and women should be a part of this process of women, peace, and security. Empowering only women will not achieve the bigger aim of peace and security in these conflict areas. So this is my view about it. I had a lot to say, most of which was covered by my previous speakers, and I'm thankful to them for sharing their experiences. But since my time has been limited, I would like to stop here. Professor Yeshi.
Professor Yashi, you're back on the net. Okay, no problem. I'll start up. Thank you, Suman. Now, next speaker we have to share the experience with us is Sangya Mala. She is a medical professional and superintendent of police of Nepal Police Force. Presently, she is serving in South Sudan, and she had earlier also served in the as a UN police in the other missions also. At present, in the southern Sudan, due to she's a medical professional, her contribution has been especially important during ongoing COVID pandemic, past Ebola outbreak, and natural and humanitarian crises such as volcanic eruption in the city of Goma. Earlier, she served as a medical team in Haiti, and she is, as I mentioned earlier, she is recipient of the UN Women Police Officer of the Year Award for 2021. So over to Sandhya for your sharing your experiences with us.
Thank you, sir, for the introduction. And just to clarify, I am with MONUSCO, that is the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I would like to also thank the joint organizers of this virtual seminar, the USI and ICWA, and for also giving me this opportunity to speak and to share my experience. After listening to all the speakers, previous speakers, and I agree to all of them. But one thing that I would like to stress, and that was most important, or what I really agreed to, was the equal participation of both men and women in peacekeeping operations, and also in situation of when we're in conflict areas. Because whenever there's a discussion about any discussion with the local population, and we approach only women, the women do not come forward to share the experiences unless they are accompanied by men. So it's still the same. Even if in the past what you experienced, it's still the same at present too. So it's because of the societal norms that women don't come forward, and there is a hindrance. So you cannot be just only women participation. It has to be both men and women equally participating in this peace process. And another thing from my experience is the meaningful engagement, and also increase in the number of women peacekeepers in the mission. But what we've seen is there's still not enough or increase in the number of female peacekeepers in the mission. That is because there was a survey done in MONUSCO. I think in all of the mission it was done, and the analysis part was there was still women were more keen to be deployed, but they still has this hesitancy because of the workplace, the culture, the workplace environment. Is it still not suitable? I mean, was it too suitable in terms of the respect that they get? The other was the infrastructure. That was it friendly, gender friendly? So these kind of things still, despite of UN's like continuous effort to have women in peacekeeping operations, there's still some the thing has not met the criteria of that is not met, even with the increased efforts. So overall, what I'd like to say is, yes, I mean, there's still challenges that is to be met, and also a sense of pride when you see a female in uniform walking by, and the local population looking at you in a different with a different perspective, and with a different vision, seeing a woman walking by in countries where women are not given the same respect. I mean, in conflict areas, you have this. I mean, women are still, because of the society, because of the post-conflict, they're not. So when women peacekeepers in blue helmets pass by, yes, they're seen in a different angle, different perspective, and that does encourage women to come forward, and also women to do something. And that personally, even I have seen that. Even when I was giving preventive sessions regarding COVID, even the women, the police officers, they would come forward to ask questions. Anything related to, a lot of myths relating to COVID prevention. So they would come forward and ask if a woman peacekeeper was giving a awareness session. So overall, yes, it's difficult and it's challenging, but it's a great experience. And also, I'm really thankful to be a part of this seminar and to hear everybody speak about their experiences, which is enlightening to me, and also a similar experience that I've been experiencing at present. So that's all. Thank you, and over to you, Dr. Yeshi.
Thank you, Sangya, for sharing your views. Gentlemen, we come to the next phase, that is a question answer session. For some technical reason, Sangya is, sorry, Yeshi is not able to connect up with us. So I will take on this session of question answer session. Gentlemen, there are a few questions here. Firstly, whatever is in the chat box, we will cover up that, and if time permits, we'll have the questions from anybody else attending here. First question has been asked by to Colonel Vanisha. To some extent, she has answered, but I will throw the question again and request her to share her views with everyone. Gentlemen, keep your answer to the precisely short and brief. A question is what steps should be taken to ensure that more local governments participate actively as opposed to the passive participation in interaction with the consultative process in the deployment area. Vanisha, you must have seen the question also in the chat box. Can we have your views on that?
Absolutely, sir. As I noted in the chat, I would start simply with our own UN Peacekeeper Engagement. It takes us sometimes to initiate change. So first and foremost, when you go to a village or a community within your deployment area, when you sit around with the key members of the community, take note of whether or not there's women present. If there isn't, ask and look to engage women in that cycle. By asking, it highlights the fact that you expect there to be women present, and normally that will initiate having women, and after the first engagement, they will tend to come to future engagements. Once women are in the meeting, engage them directly, ask them their point of view, encourage them to participate and share what it is they have to say. I'm certain they will be hesitant at first, but when they are more comfortable and they realize that you very much do want their opinion, after a bit of time, they will actually start to give their opinion. It's all about setting a basis for a person to be at ease, to engage with you. Second, use female peacekeepers as the lead. Ensure you have female peacekeepers within your engagement teams, because seeing a female peacekeeper may very much encourage women to be at ease to come forward and give their opinion, but it also demonstrates to the males the importance of having an integration. And as the persons who've just indicated numerous times, it's all about integration. For me, it's not just men and women. It's the ability for men and women to work together. That's the example we need to put out. And it's that encouragement that I hope will cause women to change their perspective from being reactionary and to being more proactive in the peace and security process.
Thank you, Anisha. May I request DIG Suman if she has something to add, and after that I'll request Seema also to give her point of view. DIG Suman, sorry, DIG Seema or Commandant Poonam.
Yes, sir. So am I audible?
Yeah.
In fact, we are also, we fully vouch for this concept of having integrated sort of a team in peacekeeping. In fact, though our contingent was termed as all female formed police unit, but if you were listening to Poonam's version, in our team of 120 police officers, 103 were operational officers and rest of the team were of male staff. They were providing logistics to us. So having a sort of integrated team is a much viable idea. But I would again reiterate, irrespective of gender or irrespective of number, every peacekeeper has to be trained and sensitized well. That is my requirement. Because if you keep on there is no point having numbers, increasing the numbers. You really have to have good officers who are trained well and sensitized well. That is all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Seema. Suman, Major Suman, would you like to add something? Or Sangya? Sangya? Okay,
Yes,
we move to the next question.
Thank you.
Next question, gentlemen. When the host states themselves are involved in the violence and not interested in any reform and don't want to let go for their sources of power, they get involved into the power of violence, how the peacekeepers can provide immediate protection, which is equally important. I repeat the things. The host states are themselves involved in the violence and they are not interested in the reform and don't want to let go of their resources of the power of violence. So how the peacekeepers can provide immediate protection, which is equally important. Can I have first views of Colonel Vanisha? Vanisha? Yeah. Vanisha, unmute yourself. Gaurav?
Okay, sir. Sorry, there was a problem unmuting. So, sir, that may be a very delicate situation for tactical level peacekeepers on the ground. But I would argue that the policies within the UN afford us the powers to ensure that persons are protected from immediate violence and threats. But also what can be done is you can use the different pillars within the UN system to actually re-engage with the host nation at both the political level, so strategic level, and the tactical level, to reinforce the ethics and values of the protection of all equally. And I think by having kind of a tactical approach of continuing to reinforce on the ground that you will not allow a vulnerable population to be violated during a conflict, while at the same time having the strategic level of the mission addressed it from a political standpoint, the force commander, the SRSG, to reinforce the ethics and values of the UN and the conditions by which the UN will continue to support the mission are two effective means to address a hesitancy to move away from what is considered to be the norm within a host nation.
May I request Major Suman, Sangha also to see us because Congo and both South Sudan have been teachers. Poonam? Hello.
Actually, it will be as my previous speaker has said here, that its situation will definitely be delicate because we are supporting the host nation. But with POC kicking in, the senior leadership of the mission must put it before the host nation to impress upon them to comply. Otherwise, independently, it'll be difficult for the mission to sustain if the mission and the host countries are at odds. So it'll be on the senior leadership of the mission to take it up with the host country.
Okay. Major Suman?
Sorry. I second what Poonam has just stated, sir, and the previous speaker too. No country can work in isolation. They have to abide by certain rules, regulations. So no country can function in isolation. So they have to accept whatever things are there in the ground. So they really can't deny. And for that, senior leadership of the mission has to exert themselves.
Okay. Can I have Major Suman, your views regarding the cases in the South Sudan and Sangya about Congo? Because if you remember in South Sudan, there was a case in, I think, 2016, when the UN peacekeepers in the hotel where they were staying, they were attacked. And the response, one though, the not lot of blame game played after that, that response was very slow or lukewarm. And by the time the actual response took place, the damage was done. So this is that I agree that there are some views that just to save the few people, massive collateral damage was avoided. However, there is a need that keeping in view the collateral damage instead of going full throttle to resolve the issue, the local actions are needed to bring the situation under control, and then with the, as somebody has said, the higher leadership, including the UN headquarters, gets involved with the host state and gets the things under control by adopting various other measures. Now there is a question for I think Dr. Benai. There is a question addressed from one of the Dr. Sanjay Kumar. I'll read the question. In many countries have not adopted the Women, Peace and Security National Action Plan. Some experts argue that there are advantages of not having the National Action Plan. Your comments. I'll request Yashi also to address this thing.
Thank you, sir. The national action plans are obviously a commitment on the part of member states of the United Nations that they would, dedicate their efforts in terms of following the WP agenda and provide all kinds of information on how they're prioritizing the WPS agenda, what kind of activities they would be doing, how it would be funded and monitored. Having said that, in terms of India not being part of, drawing up a national action plan, we get a sense that probably India doesn't want to commit itself to this, but that is not the case, because as India's foreign policy has very clear multilateral commitments, we have demonstrated through UN peacekeeping and other, last year India contributed, I think, about $150,000 dollars to the Peace Building Commission. And so our peacekeeping track record and this new commitment we are showing at the by contributing to the Peace Building Commission means that India is very committed. But yes, there could be certain internal reasons for not having drawn up the NAP. India also has a record for not, ratifying the additional protocol 2 of the Geneva Conventions, which deals with internal conflicts. India doesn't want to sign the Mine Ban Convention or not ratify the ICC. This is a clear indication of not wanting any kind of interference in our national jurisdiction. So if you say that this is a good policy, well, I don't agree with that. But what I do say, do understand is that not adopting or not formulating a national action plan for WPS, India wants to keep the flexibility as to how it wants to approach its role when it comes to implementing WPS. Otherwise, we have demonstrated very clearly, as our eminent speakers have told us today from their working in the field, how well India has contributed in terms of UN peacekeeping through sending women peacekeepers. I think I would rest my case on that.
Yashi, anything you would like to add? Yashi? I think she has, again, we have missed her. Okay, there is another question. It is addressed to DIG Seema, that what are the practical steps required to be taken by the troops to ensure the positive body language? That when the troops get deployed and they are go on patrolling or other activities, so what are the steps required to be taken to ensure they depict a positive body language? DIG Seema. Seema? Commandant Poonam, by the time she comes, can you give your point of view?
I'd just like to say that, a well-trained personnel who's aware of what he or she is supposed to do. If you train a person well, the body language improves on their own. We must ensure that the training is well done. Thank you.
Dr. This Colonel Vanisha, you would like to add something? Unmute yourself.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I have to ask permission each time to be unmuted. It takes a minute. Yes, sir. As a member of the military police, I agree. It's absolutely fundamental that there's training, but there are some key things that you can ensure that you can do to have positive body language. Smile is one. Military personnel often don't think that a smile is important. If you're smiling, you look weak. That's absolutely not true. A smile allows someone to engage and feel more comfortable engaging you. Don't stand with your arms crossed. Put your arms down to the side. It may seem simple, but those are very fundamental, foundational things that any peacekeeper can do to have an open body language. So don't stand with your hands on your weapons. If you have your weapon, make sure it's pointed in a downwards direction. All of those things allow someone to sit instead of standing. Again, if you can remove, I know today we all have to wear a mask, but if you can remove some levels of your clothing, we all wear a lot of clothes as military members on deployment. That's very restrictive. Remove when you can a level of your protective gear when you can. That just encourages people to see you as a human and to react with you. But I would argue smiling, hands not not having your cross. Those are very simple things everyone can do to improve a positive body image when engaging with others.
Thank you. DIG Suman or Poonam?
Sir, I would like to add something if I have the permission.
Please.
Sir, I think the body language will improve when you break the first barrier between you and the people whom you are interacting. And I think that the first barrier is the barrier of language. So I think whenever the peacekeepers are going to a particular area, I think training them in somewhat to the language of those people will be very, very helpful to improve the body language of the troops. And it will also help us in communicating with the people who are there, sir.
Okay. Major Suman, anything to add? Suman?
Yes, sir. I was speaking, sir.
Okay, sorry. I thought the Poonam has come because videos are off, so I can't make out of those things. Okay, the positive language is a very interesting aspect, because until unless by the body language or by the communication you establish that connect with the local population, until they have a faith in you, so your all other activities will not give you the dividends as you expect. So, though it is a very visual aspect, that is a body language, positive body language that people start having, and it is a continuous process. It is not that in the first go it will happen. It is a continuous process, and everybody has to benefit. There is a question for Major Suman. That give your experience, what is the minimum, based on your experience, what is the minimum percentage strength in a detachment of force for effective performance?
Sir, I couldn't understand the question, sir.
Based on your experience, what is the minimum percentage of strength? I think he is referring to the minimum percentage of women peacekeepers in a detachment of force for the effective performance.
I would say if we are in an ideal world, I would say it would be 50%. But in a detachment of 4, I would recommend two women peacekeepers and 2 male to make it equally good. But since there are no ideal situations, so I think even one would do. That's it.
Okay, I'll just draw your attention to the slide which I had shown from the UN headquarters. That says military observers and staff officers target is 25%, military contingent 15%, military contingent where they will be involved in the fighting, police officers 30%, and the police unit 20%. In all other appointments, they have given 30% to be achieved by 2028. So I take it that this figure would not have just dropped in from somewhere. Somebody would have carried out the reasonable research or the things to arrive at that. So, gentlemen, there are a few more questions, but we are running short of time. So I'll wind up the question answer session now, and we'll go to the for the closing remarks. Before I invite General BK Sharma, Director USI, for the closing remarks, a short introduction. He is the director of the USI from last 2 years, though he has been associated with the USI from 2012 onward. He had a very prestigious appointment in India, including command of a mounted division on the Chinese border, senior faculty member at the National Defense College, and represented the country at in the United Nations as military observer in Central America, and has been India's defense attaché in the Central Asia. He specializes in the strategic nest assessment, scenario building, and the strategic gaming. Over to General BK Sharma for the closing remarks. Sir, unmute yourself.
Good afternoon to all of you from India by our time, and a very warm welcome to this very important event, which has a tremendous significance for all of us. I'm grateful to Ambassador Vijay Thakur and ICWA to partner with the USI of India to conduct series of these webinars on UN-related issues at the policy and doctrinal level. I'm also grateful to General Goswami, who has, in addition to a very heavy workload, taken upon himself to steer this program on UN peacekeeping. As we know that today's title of the webinar is all-encompassing: Women, Peace and Security. And it has very clearly emerged during the course of our deliberations from the top practitioners who have field experience on this subject that women today are central to peace building and conflict resolution. Wherever there is conflict in the conflict zone, the worst affected are the women in terms of physical harm, in terms of economic cost, because the men are involved in the conflict and the whole burden of running and supporting the family comes on women's shoulders. And there is an emotional trauma attached with it, to deal with the crisis as a mother, as a sister, as a wife. That's another problem. So even in the de-alienation program and in the rehabilitation program, the role of women is very important. The UN can only play a supportive role, but the basic change in terms of rehabilitation has to come from the women. And that will have to happen at the society level, and also some NGOs which are working very closely on the women protection and empowerment issues. So we have to create an entire ecosystem of support in which women will have to play a very, very important role. Decision making at all levels, in their capacity as civilian, in their capacity as functionaries of the UN, and even as UN women peacekeepers at all levels. And it's very clearly stood out that today this representation is not very inclusive. Even the analysis of some of the conflict areas and the crimes committed or the atrocities inflicted on women, those case studies and those analyses are not women-centric. So there is a need for a total change in our mindsets and in our outlook in dealing with gender issues related to UN. And UN is fully cognizant of the challenges, and they are working at different levels to find certain mitigative measures to address this issue. So where does our role come as think tanks? I think like what ICW and we are doing, probably we can in this region become an umbrella organization together and request other like-minded and partner institutions all over the world to participate in this program, so that we are able to generate more awareness and give right kind of analysis and policy prescriptions to the policy makers in our respective countries and also at the UN level. We are connected with the UN headquarters with a permanent representative there. As General Goswami brought out, we are also members of the Challenges Forum, responsibility to protect, spawn. But we need to further widen this network and work more vigorously on this very, very important issue. From that point of view, we offer the services of USI. We have a number of senior officers and middle level officers who are our members, who have first-hand experience in dealing with these issues. For instance, when I was in Central America, I was involved in disarming, demobilization, and rehabilitation of Contras. And when we established those centers, there are a large number of women Contra guerrillas who came to us, and they had problems. Some of them had got married, some were on the pregnant. There were others who are, inflicted with sexually transmitted diseases. So those issues had to be looked into, and that is how we incorporated organization of American states. We involved the church, we involved number of NGOs, government agencies in the rehabilitation program. Tomorrow, if you really want effective peace building in Sudan, or for that matter, in Afghanistan, where the gender issues are very, very important, gender discrimination is the biggest problem in Afghanistan today. So we have to work on these issues, and all our models and mandates, like somebody very correctly brought out, the mandate and our models and our skills have to be all aligned so that we are able to protect women, their honor, and also help them in leading a better way of life. Then only the credibility of the UN will get established. And the worst is if we have more participation from women in the UN, it would also be a sobering effect on the men there, because there are a number of incidents that have happened where the United Nations military observers have been involved in gender exploitation, and there have been international inquiry, and that brings a lot of bad name to the organization. So if there is more participation from the women, and particularly in the investigation teams and in the resolution teams and in the report making, I think some of these malices will get addressed, and we will be able to play our role more effectively. So with these words, all it remains for me is to thank everybody who's participated in this program, particularly the participants from foreign countries who have woken up at very awkward hours to be part of this program. And we look forward to more such events in consultation with ICW. With these words, I wish you all the very best in your future endeavors. Over to General Goswami.
Good afternoon. Gentlemen, there is one question which I missed out. Ambassador Nurhan has asked a question that is UN careful on choosing which nation's soldiers are better accepted by the recipient people? I'll just like to address it myself. Ambassador, this is a two-way process, that is between the UN headquarters and the host country, as well as the UN headquarters and the donating country, and to some extent between the host country and the donating country. Now, I will just give you one example. India, each place where the UN missions have gone, they have host countries have demanded the Indian troops. But Indians have their own commitments, availability of the troops. At the same time, sometimes UN had to deny the host country a troop from a particular country because that had a very different plan by the host country, or they have already joined, the host country had already joined the hand with the donating country, and then UN realized that if that donating country goes to that host country, the troops may not deliver to the requirement of the UN headquarters. So it is a very consultative process, and UN does go into the various detail. And as I said, all three parties, that is UN, host country, as well as the donating country, has to be acceptable in all the three places. I hope I have addressed it to some extent. However, I got your email now. I'll get in touch with you on this subject. Thank you, gentlemen, each and every one of you for today joining us, and particularly as my main speakers, the ladies, we are really grateful to you all. Our next webinar likely to be in the end of April. I have your contact. We'll get in touch with you. Still, if anyone has any query or anything else, I have given my email ID in the chat box. We can get in touch in the future. So all the best and stay safe. Okay.
Thank you.